Hey, this is James Devine with the Music Ed Podcast. I am newly retired. Yes, I'm still teaching. I'll be teaching half-time at a charter school, but I'm looking forward to this new year of podcasting, and hopefully I'll be able to get an episode out every week. If you'd like for me to come and present to your district, I would love to come and present either Jazz from Day One, a new seminar I'm working on, or Teacher Saved My Life. I'll also be doing some teacher coaching. You have come to episode 231, Setting Boundaries and Saying No Nicely. Do you remember Nancy Reagan's theme from the 1980s to just say no to drugs? Unless you're older than me, you probably don't remember that. She was made fun of, but it was an effective strategy. You may not struggle with drugs, I hope not, as a teacher, but I bet you do struggle with saying no. You have to remember that when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. We don't always look at it that way. And sometimes we miss out on the great because we're doing good things. I am guilty. So much guilt in my own life over this. My mom was the master of the guilt trip because sometimes people will try to make you feel guilty. In fact, she's a cruise director of the guilt trip. My sister and I toured the world several times, and it didn't cost us a thing, except for damage to our psyche. But that's such a small price to pay for travel. So we're at the start of a new year, and if you don't have marching band, you may feel like you're rested. And that can be kind of dangerous because it can make it easier to say yes to a bunch of things because you're not feeling busy yet. The school year hasn't come into fruition just yet. So just be careful of that. You have to decide in advance what is important, and you have to stick to it. And we'll talk about some strategies in a minute with dealing with administrators over it. Will life circumstances and what's important change over time? Of course it will. So practice with me for a moment. No. You try it now. Several times now. No. Get a little bit louder. No. No. No! Of course, we can't really do it that way. So we'll talk about some tips in a minute of how to really say no nicely. Remember, though, that this is a no so that you can say yes. Repeat it daily. Say no to overtime so you can say yes to your family. Family time is so important. Say no to overeating or poor eating so you can say yes to a better quality life. Say no to going out to eat so you can say yes to your retirement account. Here are some real no's that I have said in my career. I said no to helping in the school musical so I could say yes to conducting a community orchestra. Remember, that's the better one or the greater. I said no to playing at coffee houses so I could say yes to spending time at home. I say no every day to the candy bars that are calling to me so I can say yes to size 34 pants. I said no to teaching lessons for the longest time so I could say yes to writing and practicing music. I say no to the snooze button so I can say yes to reading my Bible. And I say no to Starbucks so I can say yes to trips with my honey. Now, let's talk about how to do it nicely. I spent 13 years at a high school, and believe it or not, the band did not play at the basketball games. It was not a tradition that had been set up, so that made it a little bit easier because it wasn't already in place. But every year they asked me, sometimes it was too late, so I would say, hey, that sounds like a great idea. Can you ask me next year so we can get it on the calendar? Because they would usually ask like a week before the first basketball game. So then they would usually forget, and it would go away for a year or two. But eventually, someone finally remembered who had been there a while. And so he came to me like at the start of the school year. And I had a good relationship with him, so that made it a little bit easier. And I told him we can do one boys game and one girls game. I told him that was because I didn't want to wear out my students. During basketball season, we had just finished marching band season, and we had solo and ensemble coming up. So he really understood that. And it was a conversation we were able to hold, and we would figure out which was the best boys game and which one was the best girls game. You might also say to an administrator, when they offer a suggestion or idea to you, you might say something like, that sounds great. My plate is really full. Can you help me figure out what I can give up so I can do that? You know, when you talk about things that are obvious, it's easy to say no. So for example, if the football coach had a need for a defensive assistant coach and you were doing marching band, but you had been really good at defensive end in high school, it would be easy to say no to that. It's a good thing. You'd be helping the coach, right? But it's easy to say no to because it's obvious that you have too many other priorities. But sometimes people don't see those obvious things and they end up saying yes. So tell them, my plate is full. I really would like to help in this, but help me figure out what to give up so I can do that. I once interviewed for a position, and they said that they wanted to grow their band program. It was a K through 12 position. And so after the interview, I knew that I couldn't take the job as they offered it. So I made a proposal. And in the proposal, I said, if we're going to build a band program, we need to give up some of these other things, and maybe I can provide lessons for the K through 5 teachers, and we'll start band in 6th grade. And it was a very small district, about 450 students, K through 12. I said, maybe everybody can do band, or I could do band and choir, and every student from middle school up could be in one of the two. And they refused the proposal. They said, no, we want someone who's going to teach K through 12 and build the band program. Well, guess what? It's nearly 20 years later from when I turned that job down, and this school district, every 2 years, they're with a new teacher, and they still have not grown their band program. I'm not saying that my proposal was the best. It's just that this was not something that was as important to them. They gave lip service to, we want to grow our band program, but they weren't really interested in that. You might ask your principal, what's important to you? Have a time when you're sitting down, not when you're stressed and you're both going between meetings, but sit down and talk to them and say, hey, what's important to you? I've always had really good success with telling a principal that I'm willing to work things out to meet their goals and accomplish what's important to them. But then I remind them I'm only one person. I mean, you don't want to be snarky about it. I spent 13 years at a high school, and during that same time period, a colleague of mine was at 6 different schools, and he'd say something like, the principal doesn't like me. They're all jerks. The kids don't care. It was the people would follow him at the schools he had been at and spend many years there and find a lot of success. So the problem was in his attitude with that. In fact, so I'm at a little bit of a greater advantage here right now as a retiree, and my retirement income isn't huge. I still have to work, but the half-time job that I took, I was being a little bit more picky, and they are starting a band program from scratch. I'm looking forward to that. But I talked to the principal a lot about what are your goals? What do you want to accomplish? And there were times she said, well, we might have you do this. And I said, well, if you want me to do that, I'll do that. But if you really want me to focus on building relationships and getting a successful band program, here are the things that we will need to do. I was able to also talk to her and say, if you really want a successful band program, we can't have it be based on what grade you're in. So we can have a beginning band and an advanced band. It's a K through 8 school, but I'll be teaching middle school band. So this first year, everybody's going to be a beginner. But in following years, whoever can make it to the advanced band, they should be able to be in that band, whether they're in 6th grade, 7th grade, or 8th grade. So I was able to talk to that principal, and she has agreed to a lot of the things that I talked about. Overall, I found that developing a relationship with the principal before you need anything is the best bet. Does it always work? No. Some are jerks, but many are just overwhelmed in their own jobs, like sometimes you are. Many are actually better managers than leaders, and they're trying to manage, and managing takes a lot of work. But if you can make yourself the teacher that needs the least attention, basic things like get your grades in on time, follow the school procedures for hats and hoodies or whatever the procedures might be early to meetings, be proactive in calling and contacting parents, you will find that these actions go a long way. I had a colleague in the school I just retired from, and we had the good fortune of having band, choir, drama, and art. We had our own building. It was the building the auditorium was in. And this colleague said, the principal never comes to our building. But that was actually a compliment, because the four of us, we didn't have any major problems, and we did the things we were supposed to. So it was actually showing from that principal, who was probably slightly overwhelmed, that I don't need to pay attention to the arts people because they've got things under control. So be that department, be that person who has things under control. Hey, if you'd like to sign up for my 1-year coaching program or find out more about it, email me at jamesthedivine@gmail.com, and let's see if we can work together. I only have space to work with about 5 people. And remember, say no today so you can say yes to something greater.
The music and podcast where you get quick and